Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you all joined us this afternoon for our webinar titled Policy, Procedure, and Process, Structure to Set You Free. My name is Dan Evans, and our agency is called Hydrate Marketing. And we've been doing webinars for about 3 months. Actually, it's about 5 months. It's June already, isn't it? And so we started doing webinars earlier in the year for a few different reasons. We wanted to share some of the knowledge that we have with people and give a lot of our customers and friends and acquaintances a chance to learn some things. So we've had webinars on HubSpot for a lot of our HubSpot clients that want to learn more about that, and people who are interested. We've done webinars on LinkedIn. We've done webinars on social media, conversion path, lead generation, customer acquisition, all that cool marketing stuff. Interspersed with those marketing topics, we've had guests come on, like my friend Carol Williams, who's a productivity coach, joined us a few weeks ago to talk about productivity in some cool ways. Carol Williams recently introduced me to Susan, who I'll introduce you to in a minute. I'm also joined by Madison Merrihew, who works at our agency. She's the client and marketing manager. And Madison is a panelist and will kind of control all of our questions and all of that stuff. And you can always reach out to either one of us. Here's our email addresses. Just a little bit about who Hydrate is for those of you who don't know. We have a lot of customers on the call and a lot of friends and a lot of people we don't know, and friends of Susan's. So Hydrate is a digital marketing agency. We're based in the thriving metropolis of Lebanon, New Hampshire, and right next door to Dartmouth College, which is our saving grace. We do websites and SEO and lead path conversion and blogging and social media marketing and all of that fun stuff, digital advertising for people. But more exciting than that, I want to introduce you to Susan. Susan Fenema runs a business called Beyond the Chaos, and she comes from the great state of Texas. Is that right, Susan?
That is right. That is right.
Yeah. So as I said, Carol Williams introduced us a couple of weeks ago, and I was happy to invite Susan to join us for a webinar today about policy and process and procedure and how you work with companies to incorporate those to make things simpler and more effective. And we've all been in, I'm going to let you talk in a minute. We've all been in situations and worked for lots of different companies. And the ones that I've worked for, a lot of them are dysfunctional. They just don't work as well as they should, as much as we try to make them. And for several reasons, which you help people with. So can you tell us a little bit about your company?
Sure, absolutely. Beyond the Chaos has been around for about 4 years. I have always, in my history, worked for small business owners as their kind of right-hand girl, you know, the person that takes care of making everything happen while those small business owners can dream and create. And that has been a passion of mine. I've always worked for small business. And when I got ready to move on from my very last job, I'm like, why am I looking for another job? Let's go and do this do it to them, right? Do it with a lot of other small business owners and spread the wealth. So with 30 years of experience in project management and operations, it helps me to have that experience to help those small business owners deal with a lot of these challenges. I had 10 years as an operations director at an ad agency too, so I'm well aware of how the marketing world works. So if any of your clients are out there, I'll tell you, if you can work in advertising, you can work in anything.
This is true. You know, and your story is somewhat familiar because I kind of did the same thing. I've worked in, you know, other businesses for a long time, primarily the petroleum industry, and I worked in sales and marketing, and my MBA is in marketing and finance, and I've taught marketing, and I just said years ago, you know, I'm just going to switch it up and do this and use all of this knowledge that I've acquired through all facets of business management and entrepreneurism to help people and work with them. So you've done the same thing.
Well, many, many, many small business owners have done the same thing. And that's why we're here to help, because what you learn as soon as you start your business is, okay, this isn't what I thought. I thought I was going to get to do what I was good at and work with the people I wanted to and do the things that I wanted to do. And instead, you're pulled back into, oh, yeah, I've got to run a business. And that part can sometimes suck the life out of you. And we are in the business of getting our clients their lives back. So, one of the ways that we do that is through creating structure. And that really does set you free. If you start to build that structure, you're able to start to delegate. You're able to repeat successes. When a problem arises, you can fix it and change that process that you've created so that it doesn't happen again. And that's really what we're going to talk about today.
So let me ask you this. I think there's a couple of things that pop into my mind. Um, Often structure is associated with larger companies
Mhm.
with more resources. And, often we think that smaller businesses and smaller organizations just can't operate that way. We're not wired that way. We wear too many different hats. There's different things happening all the time, and that really can't work for us. What do you think about that?
That is a fear of a lot of small business owners, is I don't want that bureaucracy. I started this to do what I want, right? Not to follow rules. Well, the problem is that without those rules, without those things that you are consistently doing, you're not able to grow your business. You start to annoy your clients because you're not responding to them in a timely way, especially when you're running projects. If you are not putting some structure around those projects, well, how can you even tell your client when that work is due? How can you make sure you're on budget? How can you make sure that you're not giving away your trade skills because you're not staying in scope? You know that you're doing more. Those are just in the project area. The other thing that comes from that too is, how do you know when your team is too busy? When do you know to take a new project on? All of this comes together when you start to put some structure around the business. It's going to help you with increasing your profit. And the big one, and this will tie into the marketing people out there too, you start to make this part of your brand, so that you're always responding the same way, that you're always telling you're always, any client that comes in is going to go through the same process the same way, and you're able then to systemize that brand into something that's repeatable. So
That makes sense.
that's how you get out of the
Sure. And we run into that
bureaucracy.
all the time in our business, because when we bring new clients on, even though we don't offer a static service, a lot of the ways that we onboard people to what we do is consistent.
Right.
And without that consistency, it becomes a brand new thing. You start from scratch every time, and it's time consuming. And like you said, there's a lot of opportunity cost to that. By the way, I just want to mention before you dive into what you really want to talk about some more, is that for those of you that have questions, there's a Q&A button down in the toolbar, and you're free to ask your questions in there. You can also chat. It's more than likely that we will save questions toward the end of Susan's presentation, but we may see something that pops up along the way that we want to address. So we'll give ourselves some leeway on that.
That sounds great. All right, so let me dive in here. So we've talked about how we don't want to create bureaucracy, but then how do you know when you need a system? So what are some heads up there? Repeating successes is absolutely a great one. So how did this go well? Let's take some notes and write that down so that we can repeat that the next time we do the same the same action. The other is stop reinventing the wheel. Dan, just like what you talked about, onboarding a client, you go through the same steps each time. But if you only onboard a new client every 2 months and you don't have these steps in a procedure or a checklist to go through, every time you're trying to remember what's the next thing, what do I do next? And it's also all in the owner's head. It's not out there where other people can help you. So that's the other part. You need a system when you want to start delegating something. We have a virtual assistant, and we have very detailed processes written in for her to do things that I don't even now have to teach her. I just say, go look at that. And she can go and read it. And if she has questions, that's great. We'll answer those questions. But it allows you to onboard someone really quickly when all that's written down. And hey, all the other questions that the previous VAs asked have also already been readdressed in those. So it really helps you delegate. One of the big fears of small business owners is that they're going to delegate and they're going to start to lose control, or they're not going to do it the way I do it, right? And so being able to do that, you can start writing canned responses to emails or templated things that you can, templated messages you can put in your HubSpot that can go out that way. So it really helps to be able to get some of that little stuff off your plate.
You remind me of something that we've all gone through as managers at one point or another. And you have somebody new and they're still learning, and you're saying to yourself, well, I need to give Jim this project, but Jim, and I'm going to have to show him how to do it. I'm going to take my own time. It's going to take a while. I'm not sure if it will stick. So you know what? I'm just going to do it myself because I'll get it done faster. And of course, we all know the result of that. We all end up doing more. Jim sits there disgruntled because he's not learning anything and getting any responsibility, and we're just piling up more work on ourselves.
Right. And we hear that a lot. It's easier if I just do it. Well, it is right now. But then when you need to do it 100 more times over the next 30 days, it's not easier anymore. If
Right.
somebody else can handle that for you, that is absolutely the way to go. So when you're trying to figure out what you can systemize, that's really a big thing. Now we know now when we need a system, but then how do we know really what are some symptoms for when we need to do it? One is to identify bottlenecks. Where are you as the business owner holding up the show? So think about, if I went on vacation for a week, what would stop? What would come to a complete stop? So any of those bottlenecks are absolutely things that you can start to systemize. The other is if something just seems messy or out of order, chaotic, hence the name of the business, right? if you just feel like, oh, this is just so crazy, that's probably something to sit down and think through. What are the things we should be doing here? And let's make a process. The other is that when steps to accomplish something start to seem really excessive or redundant, wait, didn't we just check with somebody there? Why are we checking with them again? That's a good time to systemize too. And then as you start to write that down, you can really start to strike things out that don't make sense there.
By the way, we mentioned business a lot in your presentation, but it's not just for business. Organizations in general follow the same rules and have the same processes and procedures and problems and challenges. We have a lot of people on our call today from Dartmouth College, and they're not all working in business, but they work in so-called business units where they run across a lot of the same issues, right?
Right. It can be in a department.
Yep.
And a nonprofit. I mean, anything that you're working with, it's the same kind of thing. So, and I would even say in individually as your own person. How do you run your life? A lot of this stuff can be applied to as well. Um, Another thing is, as you're working through these things, if you come up to something, you're like, oh, wait a minute, why do we do it this way? This doesn't make sense. That is a really good thing to ask a lot, because if you come to the answer of, well, we've always done it that way. Okay, but why? There's a story out there about, every time you put a banana in a cage of monkeys and the monkeys would come and try to get it, you'd spray them, hose them down with water. And over time, they replaced monkeys and they would stop hosing them down. But all the other monkeys were telling people, oh, no, no, don't go near the banana. And so you end up with this cage full of monkeys that have never been sprayed, but won't go near the banana. So you have to always keep asking, why, and make sure that there's a real reason, not because it was always done that way. The other thing is, look for specific activities that are not efficient, or costing too much money or too much time. That's a good place to start to identify what to systemize. So then we jump into, okay, well, do I need a policy, a procedure, or a process? And a lot of times all of those are grouped together and everybody thinks they're the same thing. They're really not. A policy, that is really the rules. This is a vacation day, or you must do your timesheet. Those are policies. A procedure is a checklist. So, something you just go down and check off. Think airline pilot on his checklist before takeoff. Make sure everything works. They have that list that they repeat every time. They don't ever have to think about it. Then a process is more of written prose that explains what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how to do it. It's generally, it might have bullet points in it, but it is generally sentences. And so those three things together give you that structure to where you can start managing your company really like you mean it. So that's the differentiation. So if you get into policy and you're a one-person business, you might not need that. But I will tell you, when I started my business and I was a one-person business, I actually made a policy about vacation so that I would take a vacation day or I would take a holiday. When do we close the company? Even though it's just me, I want to make sure we stop and celebrate the holidays. So I wrote those just for me.
Has that worked out for you so far?
I have taken the holidays. Yes, I do. I do.
Excellent.
And I think
Congratulations.
thank you. I think that's really important. And that's part of what this structure helps you to do, is to remember that we are not our business. Our business is here as a tool to serve us so that we are able to live our life. And so if we are not living our life and all we're doing is our business, we're missing the point. So even if you have to make your own rules, that's not bad. But if you are working with a team, it's even more important. If you have people that are taking vacation or time off and you haven't communicated with them what the expectation is, it is impossible for them to meet the expectation. And you'll constantly be mad at them and they won't even understand why. So if you are setting that, write it down and share it with them. And these things are not negotiable when you're in policy, right? These are the rules of the company. This is how we're going to run it. Might you make a side exception because of a special circumstance? Sure. But in general, they're not negotiable. It's just the rules. Pretty straightforward. One example, especially for all you marketers out there, is daily timesheets, right? Almost everybody bills their clients by the hour. And if your team is not entering timesheets, it's pretty impossible to make sure that you're actually on the budget and on the target with your client. So you need to do that if you're not doing daily entry of timesheets, this goes for anyone that bills by the hour. Please make that a policy for even just yourself, because you lose time when you have to go back and remember what you did. You just never, you're giving away too much. We'll put it that way. You
Sure.
tend to underestimate when you're grouping it together. So let's talk about a procedure then. Now, a procedure we absolutely can do for a one-person show or for a bigger company. This is the checklist. So think about onboarding or offboarding of employees or clients, as Dan, you were mentioning. This could be also when we have a status meeting with our client. What are the things we always talk about? You know, where are our challenges with budget, scope, time? Those probably you're talking about each time. And then maybe some specific things that you might get into. So having a status meeting agenda as a checklist is a good thing to think about. Also, if you're a software developer, there are specific softwares that you install that you might want to go through a checklist of, say, putting a software solution onto somebody's server. What are the same steps that we always follow? Check, 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 and make sure you do it the same every time. Another one, anytime you're interviewing people, what is that process? So that you interview everybody the same way, especially when you're interviewing 3 or 4 people for the same position. If they all have a different experience in the interview process, then you're not even measuring apples to apples there. You're kind of saying, I feel like I like that person. But you know, maybe there is a test you want them to take. Maybe they interview with a certain number of people. And so that procedure there of knowing what order those things go in is a good example as well of a good procedure you can put in place. And moving on to process now. Process is absolutely applicable from one to many for sure. This can be bullets, like I mentioned. It could be numbered steps, but this is an opportunity to dig in a little deeper and explain. And sometimes you can put the why you do it in there. This could be your sales process. What is the onboarding? What is the first phone call script? What is the script that we follow? You don't have to read it like a like a robot, but knowing the questions that you're going to ask and being consistent with those is important. And then then what do? Do you follow up? Do you set another appointment? On that next appointment, what do you do? When do you send a proposal? How is it signed? Do you do it digitally? When are you invoicing? All of that is part of the sales process. If you're doing it over and over again, if you have a consistent way of doing it, it just becomes simple, and you don't have to think about, now what do I do next? Instead, you're thinking, how do I sell this person? Which is what you're supposed to be doing during that process. Same thing about getting paid. There's so many small business owners that hate invoicing. They hate billing. They hate anything to do with numbers. But let's face it, we're all in business to make money. And if you don't actually charge your clients, they're not just going to give it to you. So, some process of how do you get paid is important. Making sure, for example, that if you bill by the hour, are you doing it in advance? And then how are you tracking the hours that are used? If you bill after the fact, how often are you doing that? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? What kind of detail do you give to your clients? Do you want to give them an itemized list of every single 8 minutes that you worked on something? Or do you just want them to have a general, hey, this month it's this many hours? And dig into those numbers if they ask, which is, by the way, what I recommend, because if you give them detail, you give them a way to nitpick. So wait until they ask. Another one, how do you open a new project? Dan, we were talking about onboarding a new client. But then also, how do you open that project in your software tool? Um, who gets added? What are the initial steps to onboarding? Is there a kickoff call? All of those kinds of things are definitely processes that can be applied. And depending on what software tool you're using as a project management tool, and by the way, you do need a project management tool in your business, even if you are not running projects, because you run internal projects. Even if you're not running them with clients, internally, you're doing things like, I need to update my website, or I need to prepare for a webinar. What are my steps there? Having that stuff written down on a notepad is not going to help you as much as an actual software tool. So I would recommend that everyone look at software tools. My favorite is Teamwork. Asana, though, is a free option. They have a free option. Basecamp is an option. Trello has a free one. There are a lot of tools out there that can help you with that.
And we use Trello for our project management,
Yeah.
and also just to track our deliverables. We have so many moving pieces, as you know, in this business that we're in. There's a million things to do, and we have to track it somehow. And so Trello is what we use, and we can look at each other's Trello boards and see what we each have on our plates, and we go in and revisit it at least once a week and review it. And it's an absolute necessity for us, that or something like it.
It's a necessity for every business. And Dan, you're running projects with your clients. And so there's no doubt that requires a project management tool. But even if you're only doing things that are internal projects, we have a whole project in our tool that is specific to what are our operations, what are our next marketing strategies, how are we implementing those, who's assigned, when's it going to get done, all that stuff. So it is important.
Those are good examples, because you think about this in terms of companies who have a lot of projects going on, but everybody has projects in some way, right?
Everybody does.
You just gave an example. There's a project to, paint our facility. There's a project to have some new software or hardware installed. There's always something. And so those can all be considered projects, right?
Right. Anything that requires tasks performed over time with a deadline. Think about it that way. And sometimes there's not a deadline, it's a self-imposed deadline. If you are working on your own website, unless you're launching something publicly that's been announced, if your page doesn't get up there on that day, nobody knows but you. But even right. In our business, we write a blog post every 2 weeks. Okay, well, there is some deadline to that. Otherwise, you start walking on top of yourself for the next one. So that's a repeatable process that can be, done over and over. And we do have a process for that. We follow a template, a repeating task template. So everybody has those, even if they think they don't. They probably just aren't thinking projects if that's not your business. The other thing that process can handle are some how-tos. So how do you access your website back end so that you can go make edits? How do you post your blogs or send e-blasts out? Those types of things are also good to think of as process. So those how-tos help a lot. So let me give you, so now we know what they are and we know when you need them, but how do we do this easily? I mean, I can just hear the collective groan of everybody saying, ugh, now I have to sit down and write all this stuff. It's going to take forever. And it can, if that's how you approach it, but there's some really easy ways to jump in and do it. So we use a tool called Loom, Loom, not Zoom, but you could use Zoom if you want. The goal is to have something that you can share a screen to and talk through the process. So you're essentially recording yourself doing the function. Um, I do this a lot, even if there's just a question. It avoids putting a meeting on a calendar. It avoids having two people spend time together to go through something on a time that you have to all be there at the same time. And it just, nice little show and tell. Hey, when we invoice, you go look at the proposal and you read the terms, and then you click over here into QuickBooks, and this is where you go and how you create an invoice, and this is the messaging that goes out on that invoice to a client. Okay, so we've recorded all that. We've shown the different software popped up. Everybody can see it. Now, you can make that you can do all of your process by video. I think that it is important, though, to go to the next step. The next step is to actually get that transcribed so that you do have it written. As much as videos make things easy, also things change. So if now all of a sudden, oh, we don't use QuickBooks anymore, now we use FreshBooks. Okay, well, now your video doesn't work anymore. But if it's written up, you can easily go in there and say, okay, well, let's search and replace for where QuickBooks is, and then see when we get to those places if there are any changes that need to be made on that. So write it up. I do think it's important, and you don't have to do that. There are transcription services like rev.com. I'll type that over here in the chat so that everyone can go look it up. Rev.com is a great transcription service. They do an amazing job. It's $1 a minute. And now you have something written to start with. You also, if you're delegating, hey, person I'm delegating to, take this video and write the process from it, please. There you go. Also off your plate as the owner. Then I would also make sure that if things change, if somebody edits those processes, that they somehow alert you. It can't just be random people editing your processes all the time. You want to have a handle on it so that they're consistent, and that as things change, the people that are involved are also notified. Alternatively, if you are not in front of a computer and you're trying to write processes, if you work out in the field, for example, or something like that, you can absolutely, as you direct the person on what you need them to do, have them write the notes and then have them write up the process from that. Then you can review it to make sure that nothing was left out. So there are lots of ways to do that simply and without a lot of extra time put on you to do more when you're already trying to get it off your plate.
And Susan, I've found in the past as a manager and business owner that a lot of times I think, well, I can write all of this up, but, people won't look at it, or they don't really want to look at it and follow it. But I've found myself to be wrong. And that over the years, I've realized that people really do like to have something that they can look at and understand the process. And so, whereas I thought it was a waste of time before, I realized that it's a necessity and it is appreciated.
It is. This is one of the symptoms of needing process is when you find your team is not meeting expectations. So if you're always frustrated, it's probably because you haven't communicated your expectations clearly. Most team members want to meet your expectations. And if they know how, they will. And shoot, I go in and reference these. When I'm working with my virtual assistant, for example, I might have to go back and, I haven't done this in a few months. How am I supposed to give it to her? Okay, so now I can go look at my process, and then she's able to, proceed on the right path, as opposed to me just going off the handle and not doing it the right way, and we all do that too.
Yes, that's true.
The
Yeah, I'm sure you struck a chord with our listeners when you said something about being frustrated with people not meeting expectations.
Right.
It's as much our fault in a lot of cases as theirs, if not more.
Well, and a good hint of when it is definitely your fault is when you're frustrated with everybody all the time. At some point, it's you, right? All those people can't be wrong all the time. It probably is a reflection on their leader. So, keep that in mind too. If you're frustrated a lot, put the process in place, and it's going to take a little time. We'll talk about that in a minute of how to roll that out. But some suggested processes for all businesses across the board. Write these down: sales, invoicing and getting paid, running payroll, opening projects, and closing projects. Pretty much every business needs those, minimal. So those are good places to start. So with writing your processes, you noticed I even mentioned, QuickBooks and FreshBooks, right? So your processes can have a software influence. What is your CRM? How do you manage your finances? Where do you manage your projects? And what do you use for timesheets? All those things can affect your process. And in fact, sometimes drive it, because the way that you use that tool is part of your process. And forcing your process into a tool that won't handle it is also not going to work. So you have to take those software influences into account when you're working on your process docs, for sure. Next question that comes up a lot is, okay, great, I've got them written down. Okay, well, they're in a Word doc sitting on your desktop. That's not really useful. We want to make sure that we're storing them in a centralized area that can be accessible by all the team members. So Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, any of those file sharing servers work. Microsoft makes something called SharePoint. That's also an awesome tool because you can easily push out changes and make sure that the team members read what the changes are. We use our project management software. So we have in our operations project, we have the notebooks where we have all of the processes written, and we don't upload the files there. We actually copy and paste into the software tool itself so that it's searchable, and you can find what you're looking for very easily. Some
How about
companies.
Slack? Does Slack fit into that, or Evernote, or is that a different use?
So I love Slack. I adore Slack. I don't know how I would run my business without Slack, but it does not work for process storage, because most of us have the free version. So you only have 10,000 messages and they go away. And it's not easy to go back and edit. So if you want to use Slack to say, hey, you need to go read this process, that's one thing, but it should be in a shared location. Some companies
Okay.
have private websites, wikis, and so that's a good place too. And if you are a physical outdoor type business where you don't use software, this is the only time I will ever tell you that a 3-ring binder is acceptable. If you have a situation where your team does not use software for your business, having a place where they can go and actually look it up in a central place is good, but that's a last resort. I would challenge even those businesses that think they don't need software to look into that, because it can really simplify your business. So once you have them, you need to actually alert your team now where they are and that they need to review them and that they are now responsible for following them. Just saying, oh, here's a process, that's not going to cut it. You really need, if you have a project management software, assign a task in there with a link of where they should go and review it. And then when they check it off, they're acknowledging that they've read it. Another option is in a Slack channel, you can say, go read it here, and then require everybody to give you a thumbs up when they have read it. So to that point, you can use Slack, but you can't store them there. Another is digital signatures. Now, if you have an HR manual, for example, you might want a digital signature on a form that says it's been reviewed. So that's a way to go too, through a tool like Adobe Sign or HelloSign. You can make that happen. And then, of course, if you're using paper, physical signatures or initials is a way to show that it's been read. Now, after you've done all this work to write them and to distribute them and to get everyone to read them, compliance is the next part. You really have to require it. And first part of that is, remember, you are the example. You are setting the tone. So if you are not following your processes, you are absolutely giving everybody permission not to. So you have to do it. That's first. And if your systems are not enforced, they're worthless. If everybody is just allowed to go and do it their way, the systems are not worth anything. So some easy ways to handle it. First, you announce to everybody it is here, and you tell everyone. But when their process is being violated, reminding everyone again does not necessarily help, because those people that are following the rules are going to be the ones that, oh no, did I do something wrong? Should I go look? What did I do? And the ones that aren't following the rules are like, oh, whatever. They're oblivious anyway. So make sure that that gentle reminder to follow the rules comes to the individuals that are not. That's really good basic manager technique there. Share good things to everyone, address bad things one-on-one. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
I find that's a hard thing for a lot of people to do. A lot of people go into business because they like the product or service that they went into business to provide or create. And they didn't go into business because they decided they wanted to wake up and be a manager one day. And so it's hard for people to manage. And I can't tell you how many businesses I've been into over the years where the manager or the owner will say, yeah, I could tell them 1,000 times, they just don't do it. Well, why don't they do it? Yeah, they just don't do it.
Right. That's
so
not okay.
I think, yeah, crossing that, there has to be, as you said, maybe having the processes and procedures to fall back on gives you a way to say, well, let's look at this. Let's remind ourselves what the process or procedure is, and let's see where the disconnect was in doing this. Maybe having that document is a good way for somebody who is uncomfortable holding people to task to be able to do that.
That's absolutely a good tool to use. And the other is that when you're having that one-on-one conversation, you might learn something about your process. Like the reason they're not doing it is because it doesn't work. Okay, well, now we need to revise the process, right? So that's something to take into account too. I just put into the chat a book called 1 Minute Manager. It is a fantastic way to manage. It takes all the pressure off. It's quick 1 minute correction or high five. You did great. And if you're always doing that all the time, it's just it's a lot easier, and nobody feels like they're being called on the carpet, because they're used to getting constant feedback. So, if you have people that absolutely won't do it, as you said, Dan, that you need to consider whether they need to be part of your company anymore. Because if you are constantly letting somebody violate the rules, it affects everybody else on the team. So that is definitely something to consider is, do they need to be there anymore?
Yeah, another difficult thing for business owners and managers to do. Nobody likes to go through that process, but it's absolutely necessary.
Absolutely. And it will, believe me, the first time you fire somebody, it's going to hurt and you're going to be nervous. But after you see the result of that person not bogging down you and the team, it's going to be empowering for the future. And you never want, I always looked to is when I set somebody free, so to speak, that's really, we're also, they're not happy if they're not good at this, or they're getting yelled at all the time. They're not happy. Let them be set free to go find a role where they are happier. So there are ways to look at that as a owner too.
Great point.
Take
That's
a
a
little
great
bit of
point.
pressure off. With these documents, you have to remember, just like we talked about, maybe it doesn't work. These are living, breathing documents. The systems should grow as you grow. When you're a 1-person business and then a 5-person business and a 10-person business, your systems are going to change. And so they need to evolve and grow as you learn things, as things change. You want to keep that updated. Absolutely get input from your team. What's working? What isn't? This also helps them feel like they've been involved, and so they're more likely to adopt them. Then also, here's a big one. Someone needs to be designated as the process champion. That could be you. It could be an operations person or a project manager. It can even be the person who usually follows the process. So, for example, my VA, when she asks me a question, she takes the answer and she goes and puts it in the process. So she's responsible for keeping those processes updated so that she knows next time. And I know if I have to go do it for her, we have that updated. And then also, I would say review your systems annually, at least. Just read through them. Pick the least busy time of your year. Set a recurring reminder in your project management tool. And for me, that's the last week of December. I will go and review them. If you are growing and changing quickly, you might need to do that more often, maybe quarterly. But if you're on a steady growth cycle, annually should be fine. So we have all of the processes written. They're all out there. Now, how do we delegate them? How do we actually get somebody to do them? Obviously, first thing is give them the process. That is the first. If you need to show them how to do it, if you haven't made a video, you can make a video, or get on a call with them and talk through it, through Zoom, through GoToMeeting or whatever you use, and record that session. And then they have that to look back on as well. Typically with delegation, you want to show them how to do it, then have them do it while you watch, and then have them do it without you, and you check the work behind them. So those 3 steps should get that person off and running, and working it the way you want it to work. And they can write it up to help systemize that.
Will you repeat those 3 steps again, please?
Sure. Show them how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Have them do it while you watch, and then have them do it without you, but you check the results of the work.
Okay.
And then after that, they should be on their own. If there's a sticking point, of course, you might have to repeat one of those steps if something has changed or come up, but those will help you get that work off your plate. And then all of a sudden it's just happening without you, and it's wonderful. It's amazing. There's all sorts of stuff going on at my business all the time that I'm like, oh, great, that got done. I had no idea we were doing that today. But
it's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing when that happens. And that's when you start to get set free. So There we go. Structure will set you free.
Okay, that
Do we
makes sense.
do we want to take some questions?
Sure. Yep, let's do that.
Okay.
Some people, I see that some people have chatted. We have
Mm-hmm.
one in the Q&A. If you have some questions, I urge you to enter it in the Q&A button, and let's see what we have.
All right. Kim, I am reading yours. You were working with a VA who's putting messages out there that didn't resonate. That's a big one, right? You want it to be your voice. Um, and then she outsourced your account. Oh, wow. That's that's bad. So you were right to be terrified, but but don't be terrified about being assertive. Um, that is important. It is your business. It is your voice. It is your reputation. And so remembering that and being able to stand up to it and say, no, this is not what I want, and this is not how I like it, um, that will help a lot. From that standpoint, too, there are tools out there where you can write templates. Gmail lets you write templates in it. So where your communication can actually be your words, which helps a lot. Uh, I also, my sales assistant, we do some LinkedIn outreach. And we have a routine where she gives me their message, she gives me a link to their page, and she gives me her proposed response. And I can then just go through and check off and say, yes, 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 that works. Oh, I want to change the words here. And then she goes out and does all the responding for me too. So it is my voice, it is my thoughts, and it is my words that are going out. But she does it for me. Let's see. Kim, finding the words to address things that aren't on point is such a challenge, being directive and effective. It is. And the way that you get over that is do it. Um, I say that too about talking about money with your clients. You, the way you get over being afraid about talking about money is to talk about money. Um, and so, to that point, Kim, I would recommend that book that I put up there, The 1 Minute Manager, to you. It gives you some tips on how to do it uh, in a non-confrontational, regular way that makes it a lot easier. And that book is really short. You can really read that book in about 30 minutes. It's really short. Also, I guess they should have called it the 1 minute book. All right.
Susan, have you ever read Eat That Frog?
I have not read Eat That Frog, but I have read Who Moved My Cheese. So
Okay, yep, for sure.
probably
With
about the same thing.
Eat That Frog is about tackling that one thing that you have on your plate that you don't want to do. It's always there. It's lingering. It makes you nervous. It makes you lose sleep. And it's about, if you do anything, wake up and get that thing done and move it off your plate.
Right. And then it's not lingering and hanging and weighting you down. And that kind of stuff takes away from your ability to be creative in your business and do the things that you want to do and accomplish
Can
that
you
stuff.
speak just a little bit about your process when you start working with a client?
Sure. So do you want the sales part or the actual when we take them on as a
No, I
client?
think, no, when you have them as a client, how do you
Okay.
start working with them?
So we kick it off. We have a phased approach generally, depending on what they want. If they are looking for consulting, we start with a process of going through uh, we have 4 meetings with them. We talk, and each meeting we talk about what are your tools that you're using, what are the challenges that you're facing in your business. It's really kind of a discovery process. We want to learn how they run because we don't want any of our clients to be jammed in to this is the beyond the chaos way, you must do it this way. We want to do it there. We want to make it work their way. So we learn that in many cases, we are even helping people figure out that they need a tool. and that they need process. If they have process, we want to know if it's written or if it's in somebody's head. So we go through these meetings, and between meetings, we start investigating behind the scenes in their tools. So we might go into their project management tool, see how they're using it. And then part of that next meeting is giving them quick low-hanging fruit. Hey, if you just do it this way, that's going to solve this problem right off the bat. Yes, we need to put some more process and we need to put some project management around it, but that one little piece of the low-hanging fruit will help. So we go through that for about 4 weeks, and then we write a thorough implementation plan. These are all of the things that we think will help your business run more effectively. This is about how many hours we expect each of these things to take. And then we move into phase 2, which is the actual implementation part, where we go and implement it for them. So we might create a template in their software. We might write process. We might just be being project managers as well. So there are, it depends on if they need all that consulting phase up front. If they are already using a tool and running projects, but they're just in chaos, then we can start with project management hours and just get a project manager in there and clean it up and get on top of it and start facilitating.
So that sounds like a good process, because you identify, you do your discovery, you identify what the challenges and opportunities are, and you have a recipe to address all of that. And you're not just handing over the recipe and walking away. Right. You're following up and holding them accountable in the process, or helping them do it. I think we've all hired people in the past to help us out, where in the old days they would just write a big book and give you about 50 pages of here's what you should do, and it goes up on the shelf and you don't do anything with it.
You're like, hey, thanks for telling me what to do, but I didn't have time to do this in the first place. Right? Yep. If I had time, I would have already done it.
Sure.
So yes, we absolutely help with that implementation.
Yep. We have time for one more question. If anybody has a question, go ahead and put it in the chat or in the Q&A button, and we'll address that. It's getting a few minutes away from our stop time. So looks like we don't have anybody with more questions. I do want to share with you the screen. Susan, can you tell us about this?
Sure, absolutely. I do have an offer for everybody that is on this webinar, or even if you're listening to it later. We are offering help. So if you don't have time to do all of this yourself, or you don't know how, or you're not a good writer, or you're overwhelmed, we absolutely can help. And so we will offer this audit, and I'll put this link too, so you can just click on it. I'll put it in the chat over here. It's a free audit. It walks you through a bunch of questions, and then you meet with me, and I will give you 3 free recommendations right off the bat on how to improve your operations or your project management, whichever you're struggling with. Those questions will tell me where you are, and as we talk through it, you'll get some really good tips on how to do that. It's a $497 value, and it's totally free for anybody on this webinar.
Well, wait, that's not all.
That's not.
So have you ever had anybody cry when you go through those questions with them?
I have not had anyone cry. I have had people that many times the reason they're filling out the audit is because they're overwhelmed already. Sure. And so then as you start talking through it, it becomes more real. There is a lot of, when you're doing this stuff to your business, that can be very overwhelming, because you start to realize how much better it can be. You start to realize sometimes how many things were falling through the cracks that you didn't even know. Sure.
And I have found a lot that people are embarrassed. They feel badly about the way they have or have not done things in the past. And so they're hesitant to kind of lay it all out there and put themselves in what they consider to be a vulnerable position. Right. But I always say, and I've run across it really recently, I said, you know what, you're not alone.
You're
You know,
not.
if you think you're the only one that let your email list go to heck, you know, and you have, you know,
Right.
17,000 people on there and 12,000 are bounces, you're not the only one. It just needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. And, you know, I have people that are like, well, I want to get things cleaned up before we let you come into this stuff. And it's like, no, that's what we are here for. You know, don't clean before the maids come, right? Let them do the job that you're hiring them to do. And you haven't done it yet. So the likelihood that you're going to do it is not high. And
Good point.
we're very compassionate. You know, we're small business owners. We get it. So, you know, it's important to us to partner with you, feel those things with you, and help you
Yep.
get out the other side.
Okay. Well, I want to remind everybody that this will be recorded, and so I'll send everybody who registered a link to the video of this if you want to curl up with it this evening and kind of review, or maybe just get contact information, and you can always email us as well. You'll have that information. Susan, I really appreciate you joining us today.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. Yep, Madison, thanks for your help, and thanks everybody for jumping on with us. And we'll keep you apprised of future opportunities for webinars and ways to get in touch with Susan and all of that stuff. And hope you all have a great rest of the day, and hope you follow those policies, processes, and procedures, or start thinking about them. And we'll catch up with everybody soon. Bye-bye, Susan.
Bye. Thank you.